Princess Diana died in 1997. I was in Transylvania at the time, glued to a tiny black and white television as the news dripped in. She'd been riding in the back of a Mercedes through a tunnel in Paris. French authorities blamed the crash on Henri Paul, the tipsy driver. However, this tragic event would become one of the biggest conspiracy theories in modern history. The British establishment had motive. Had she lived, the divorced Diana would have set up a rival court with a great claim to the throne. Even if the claims that she was about to marry a Muslim, was allegedly pregnant, and her opposition to the arms industry are all exaggerated, Diana undeniably had enemies, was isolated and vulnerable. These British comedians attempted to home in and ridicule a few key pieces of evidence.
So, we're all agreed that that's the best way to do it?
Absolutely. It's so simple. No messing around with poison-tipped umbrellas or snipers. We just get a chauffeur drunk.
Slightly drunk.
And assume that he'll crash the car.
Yeah. As long as we pay for a bunch of motorcycling photographers to harass him, I'm sure that'll happen.
Funny sketch, but actually there's nothing to rule out the tactic of repeatedly intimidating someone on the road to eventually cause a fatality. And apparently it did happen at other times to Diana. Any plot may have been inexact, but it remains possible for the accident to have been achieved on purpose through sustained intimidation on the road, all the while knowing that newspaper photographers would be blamed. In this case, the key vehicle was the white Fiat Uno, which we know clipped Diana's Merc and sent it spinning off course. So what's the crucial point? It's this: can we prove that the owner of the Fiat Uno had nothing to do with Diana's enemies? My parents owned Fiat Unos for about 35 years. They wouldn't have been part of a plot to kill the future Queen. So, was the owner of this car a straightforward Middle England normie? Hardly. The Uno reportedly belonged to a bodybuilder called Levan Than. And Than's father said his son had resprayed his white Uno red hours after the crash. Suspicious enough, but the leading conspiracy theorist John Morgan believes the Fiat Uno driver was in fact a shifty paparazzi photographer called James Andanson, who bragged to friends that he was in the tunnel when Diana crashed. Investigators found evidence that Andanson was miles away from Diana that night. They identified an image of Andanson that showed him photographing a musician the following morning, as Diana's death is reported in the background on TV. But you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to realise this actually tells us nothing about where Andanson was in the early hours. More to the point, none of this has been properly tested because Than has never talked and Andanson apparently burnt himself to death in the woods. The case remains a mystery without that evidence from the Uno driver, which is why it's a more convincing conspiracy theory than JFK. Combined with motive and family emotions running so high, I'm more sympathetic to the conspiracy case. I used to joke that if you had 3 billion quid and a hotline to the SAS, you'd murder your in-laws too. But that flippancy sits badly with me nowadays. At heart, this is an aching, horribly human story of ongoing childhood loss. As a parent myself, it feels implausible that a family could attack itself in this way, even through some sort of indirect order to protect the stability of the firm. I want to say it's just an accident, but I'm also dragged back to two stories that sit badly with me and which I've never seen analysed before by anyone. One, when the team of seemingly well-meaning police investigators on the case actually went to MI6 headquarters.
MI6's records are meticulous. Every single thing they do is actually documented and put on record. I wanted access to everything. Only 3 people in MI6 would have that type of access. It's called God's access.
The lady who helped us was an MI6 officer, Miss X. She was given God's access. She could go anywhere in that system. Basically, we checked hundreds and hundreds of things. We wanted to find out if certain names appeared anywhere in their database. We did every search that we wanted to do for Operation Paget.
You can take it from me, there was nothing in there that had relevance to what we were doing in terms of evidence or taking our inquiries forward.
What we're not telling you is some of the precise details that we're not allowed to tell you.
I looked at lots of files which really didn't have any link or relevance to the princess. And I found them extremely interesting, but that goes with me and Dave Douglas to our graves.
The idea that MI6 would give a bunch of coppers access to every secret in modern British history is a little fanciful. It seems to me that they've been flattered and given a cleaned up database. The second story is when the Queen privately told Diana's butler to be careful because there are powers at work in this country about which we have no knowledge. The butler knew the meeting was heavily coded too. She fixed me with her eye and made sure I knew she was being deadly serious. I told Her Majesty I intended to protect the princess's world and keep safe her secrets. The Queen responded by nodding her approval and smiling. The press speculated loudly about who these dark forces must be, but of course the only dark forces the Queen could have possibly been referring to are her own. Diana's accident is consistent with computer modelling, but the investigation only feigned to test a conspiracy theory. It was more inclined to debunk a sprawling set of allegations. Whereas I've shown the Kennedy grassy knoll conspiracy simply could not have happened. With Diana, there remain tantalising evidential gaps alongside peculiar power games throughout. I've investigated some big conspiracies. Some went really well.
By the national security state in the United States.
Others went weird. Join me, Matthew Alford, on YouTube for short films and commentary on conspiracies, power, and propaganda.